quite the windy day, so we'll see how this audio turns out. Been waiting for the sun to come up to see if the wind would die down. Yeah, and I had a few topics that I wanted to get on and talk about, but I figured I'd touch on my coronavirus experience here in Salt Lake City, Utah, where I live. And it has been interesting to see people's reaction over the last week, just locally, not necessarily online or in the news. I'd personally been preparing for months now for this. Not sure what everybody else was paying attention to, probably just the mainstream media, who perhaps only recently started warning people of the possible consequences of this. Which, people will blame on Trump or something. People that they don't understand, how the media works. They think that it's actually like news or reality being portrayed by people that are trying to give you the facts, which in some cases could be true, and they're relying on world events and facts. But anyway, we'll get into that maybe. But the local response that people have had has been interesting, because it seemed like yesterday was Saturday the 14th, Pi Day, which nobody seemed to remember because they were all in panic over this whole thing. But yeah, stores, obviously just kind of like everywhere else in the country, like being raided. Toilet paper aisles completely empty, which is that strange toilet paper phenomenon that we've been seeing. Which makes it's worth it because of the memes only, But, I mean, again, I think that also goes back to the media and things that are portrayed there. The mass consciousness is easily manipulated and propagandized these days. But yeah, even like coin shops, I thought, hey, now's a great time to invest in some precious metals. And luckily I was able to locate and purchase while they're cheap. But a few of the shops, one of the shops I went to was wiped of all of the things I was looking for. And the people in there kind of seemed a little overwhelmed with the clientele that had been coming in up to that point. Also, my family and I have been planning on moving to northern Arizona in less than a couple months. And of course, all this happening, we're already well in motion into that direction. So we still plan to do so. It'll just be, we'll have to be loose. We'll have to adjust maybe, but otherwise we'll just continue with our plans. And that goes into the economic consequences of all this. So I think people are really hyper-focused on the virus right now, which is understandable with what's happening with it. And I'm not, just because I'm picking on the media, we might go into that a little bit more here if we have time, it doesn't mean that I don't think that there's like a real problem happening. Like I'm not gonna get on here and say it's all fake, there's nothing really happening and the blah blah blah. Like obviously there does appear to be something going on. We'll just leave it at that. But what happens is, what people don't understand is like the media, they look at it like science or something, which is ridiculous. And I don't mean that science is ridiculous, just hear me out here. The scientific community and the consensus trance that people get in, right? That if something's being repeated, or if the so-called scientific community agrees on something, then it's the truth, right? Because that's what science is all about, is the truth. Discovering the truth about things, or the facts about things. But what they fail to understand is like appealing to a scientific community or to some kind of scientific authority on things is anti-science. That's anti-scientific. It's a fallacy to appeal to consensus is the point. And science is a great method, right? The scientific method, process of creating reproducible scenarios, testing with different variables, using a peer review model. I guess, like I said, I don't think the peer review system is a clean system of truth seeking. Like understanding how the world works from my perspective is that seems to be a little bit naive to think that the whole scientific community is all about discovering the truth. It's not about greed. It's not about profits. It's not about control. It's not about government power or corporate policy. Right? Oh no, it's all, everybody who's in these fields is all in it just for the truth, and that's all they're trying to do, is discover the truth about our reality. People don't know enough about their own psychology to understand what other people might do in certain situations. So, that being said, the media, the corporate media in the United States of America, anyway, let's just keep it here, but it's pretty much a global thing now, is controlled by a very small handful of people. And like the fact that I would have to go explain that to other people is kind of ridiculous. But that's the issue, is that most people get their information, especially in times like this, in times of panic and distress, and that's kind of my point, is that people will believe whatever they hear when they're freaked out. Or they'll at least let it influence them. I really hope the wind isn't just totally killing this, which definitely could be, because there's like this slight breeze just running through. Probably just hitting the top of that mic on that phone. For the most part, the phone mic has done me well, but it's getting like a little windy these last couple days. But yeah, so there are cartels, gangs of criminals, or pirates, or whatever the hell you want to look at it, that basically own all the assets of the infrastructure that would pump out the message of whatever they kind of want to put out there in the mass consciousness, in the public mind. And so this is a complicated situation. I mean, because the coronavirus, obviously, like I said, there's something going on. There's probably a real pandemic. There are people dying. But basically, the media is there to manipulate you. And people will say, oh no, they're not. How could you say that? And like, what are we supposed to do? How are we going to get our information, about all this? And they're like glued to their CNN 24-hour newsreel, right? With this thing happening. But I'm not saying like all of a sudden they become the manipulators. Like, it's not like a revelation that I'm having like about this. It's just like, I've known about this for a long time, that the media lies to you, and like most of what they put out is complete bullshit and propaganda to manipulate you and control you and brainwash you. And that's been the case in America since at least I mean, if not the very beginning, since at least you could say like around World War I, Federal Reserve being put in place. Council on Foreign Relations was created in order to persuade people why they needed to have a central one world community, or like the League of Nations is what it was, right? So after World War I, here comes the wind. Hear it. Woo. After World War I, we'll just sometimes when that sun comes up over the mountain, it gets really windy for a minute, and then sometimes it'll just be peaceful. Today's supposed to be a very nice day, actually. So this will be like one of two getting outside. As you can see, I'm not afraid to go outside. I'm not around a lot of people. I've seen one other person this morning. Almost nobody on the roads. Except my neighbor. I saw him as I was walking out. He was outside. You know, that's kind of my thing moving forward, is early in the morning, maybe really late at night if we need supplies. But I just want to stay away from people in general right now. They're panicking. We're set, like I said. I have a family of 5 people in our little family, obviously, and we've been thinking about this for a while now. And when I say a while, I don't just mean the last few months. Like, I've been personally taking steps and measures. Here, we'll just hide it in this little nook right here while the wind passes over. I've been personally taking measures in my own life for a decade, you know, situating things so that as this time comes, when there's the real story that's going to happen here is the financial collapse and the monetary collapse, the economic catastrophe that's looming. You can already see it happening, obviously, with the most weakest aspects of the economy and the fake inflated economy is in the stock market. And the fact that the Federal Reserve was completely manipulating the economy for the last, over a decade, since 2008, really. And obviously way before that. It's not like that just started, that they're manipulating things, but those in the know or somewhat more in the alternative community have been warning and seeing this new bubble coming for a long time. And that's really what's happening here. Just to be clear, that the media is going to make it look like certain political things and certain maneuvers by Trump, or that China or this virus is causing the financial collapse and the financial panic. But really, that was going to happen anyway. It might have happened differently, it might have happened slower, but this is more of a way to control that collapse and then potentially do like a massive amount of quantitative easing to sort of prop this up a little bit more so that there's not just like complete blood in the streets moving forward in the next few months. But then at that point, they must have some plan or idea of how that, the social economic system will be rolled out, moving with cards, credit systems, points, things like that. You'll get a card in the mail, which will have a certain amount of, money on it that you can go exchange for food and things like that. And that'll be the beginning of what you'll see as like a one world economic system, which has already been in place for quite some time. People, think that conspiracy theorists are nuts, and they just call them conspiracy theorists, A, which shows that they're not thinking, that they have no ability to critically think about things. And then B, that's already been done, folks. The Bank of International Settlements, the Federal Reserve system in America has been expanded all over. That model's been duplicated to where now there's basically Federal Reserve banks, central banks all over the planet, who are centrally controlled by the bank in Basel, Switzerland, the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements. And the World Bank and the IMF have way more power, I guess, than people give them credit. And I think the United Nations and the World Bank and the IMF are just peacekeeping organizations and policy setters. They really have no idea that that's the exact opposite of what these organizations are put in place to do. They're put in place to control resources, to control people, to control governments, countries, decisions, how things work, how the overall economic system and really the conditions of the planet and even the conditions of people's life are formed, and how that's all going to be carried out moving forward. And so really, you're not going to hear this kind of stuff and kind of talk on the mainstream media. And they'll try to politicize it and make it seem like a Trump thing or a this is why we need social health care thing. And see, people don't understand what socialism is. They think that it's being nice to each other. They think that socialism and Bernie just want to save everybody. But they don't understand what socialism really is centrally controlled and condensed power. It's a centrally planned economy. It's a centrally planned life for you. And they don't seem to understand that Nazism, Stalinism, the whole Soviet empire was a socialist communist empire. And I say both because they were both. It wasn't just like communism is this completely separate thing from socialism. It's really the same thing, just kind of different flavors of the same system. And Bernie Sanders and his political system sounds great on paper until you know what the real agenda is behind Fabian socialism and democracy itself. And Fabian socialism was again put in place, and people, well, that sounds really esoteric and weird, I don't even know what that is. That's democracy. That's what we have now. That's what replaced monarchs, supposedly, and that old power structure is democracy. I mean, it should have been. You hear the constitutionalists crying right now. It's a republic! De facto, it's the oligarchical elite, occult, satanic, Luciferian death cult. That's the de facto, that's what's actually happening. We're going to venture out here out of that cove and see if we can get away with it. And the face that's put on that, the mask, the false persona of all that is called democracy. And people think that their votes actually make a difference. They think that the president makes some huge difference in the world, how things work. They're completely fooled by what the Fabian socialists set up, which is a system that says, oh, you're participating and you have a voice, and it's about the majority that does protect minority. All these like fancy language for really what was set up to control people. You know, the Fabians' symbol is a wolf in sheep's clothing. That will tell you a little bit about their real agenda. Was that people are dumb. This is what they would say. You know, Bertrand Russell, or Bertrand Russell wasn't exactly a complete Fabian. He's like a going in and out. But Beatrice Webb, or the Webbs, if you look at some of their writings, or any of the globalist elite planners or people, they write this stuff in their own books of what they really want and what they really think about you. Okay, let's see if we can. Let's go around this way, because then we might stay out of the wind. But what they really think is that people need to be controlled. People are just dangerous. The masses are idiots. And they should just be manipulated and controlled for the betterment of everyone. For the betterment of what they're calling now like the planet. What they really mean is like the planet for them. The planet for the ruling elite. See, we the people, the capital P, we the people of the United States of America is really the ruling occultocracy, the ruling oligarchy that rules over you, putting in place an infrastructure of power to save themselves and protect themselves from the idiot masses known as United States citizens. Citizens of the federal government of the United States of America, which is a foreign corporate entity who's established themselves in Washington, D.C. and really is like a foreign corporation that subjugates and rules over you with corporate policy. That's all it all is. It's all commerce and corporate policy. All the laws, all the different federal laws that you're meant to follow, the IRS, taxation, federal taxation, Social Security. This is just corporate policy. It's not actual law. It's not actual common law or man's law or natural law. So going back to the Council on Foreign Relations, I mean, what they were put in place to do is convince people that they need to accept things like the League of Nations, like central governments, like one world governments. And they operate very slowly. They didn't think that it would get done right away. The Council on Foreign Relations, again, 1921, established to convince the American public that they needed to accept the League of Nations, which is now the United Nations, which we did eventually accept. It took a lot of power shifting and another war, several more wars since then have formed the world into what it is now. And that system that they were trying to get us to accept has been accepted. And the other thing that people get confused is it's not just like government that's doing all this, or like the Bernie Sanders people would think like it's all just corporations or capitalism is the problem, right? That's what people don't understand. These are all, I mean, those things are real, but it's not one or the other. They're the same thing. Corporations are governments. The government is a corporation. There. I think I found a non-windy spot. If you look at the British East India Company, they set up a very interesting infrastructure where, like, the monarchs would fund them or sponsor them to go discover different parts or explore or bring back spices and things like that, drugs as well. People are naive to that, but a lot of the original trading was about different sorts of spices, they say, like how they taught us, but a lot of it was drug trade and the opium trading that went on for tea, which is a stimulant. I wouldn't call it a drug, but some people could say, yeah, that's a drug too. Caffeine or like stimulants and things like that. Different types of tea. Guess you could look at it like that. But that's where a lot of these systems of law come into view, is from the first corporation was like the British East India Company, who had corporate policy and had a system of law known as maritime law, the law of the sea. Now, you'd wonder, why the hell are you bringing that up? Well, again, the United States of America, the federal government, is a corporation. And if you look at the British East India Company's flag, it's quite interesting, the similarities between that and the American flag. And I'll kind of leave that there, maybe put a little slide on the screen about that. But, you know, America is not a very old country, but it is kind of an old country that hasn't gone through a giant, like, revolution or a complete shift in the infrastructure that was put in place. Now, depending on what angle you look at it, that sort of isn't true. I mean, there's been a massive shift from the beginning of America to now on how things operate. But from other perspectives, not really. I mean, it's always been about power and control over people. And this is just more like a replacement of monarchy with something else, yes, but it doesn't mean for the better necessarily. It just means that they felt the times were changing, and obviously things needed to change with the way that power operated on the planet, or how these psychopaths kind of operate. So they gave us a whole new game, a whole new way of looking at it that made us feel like we were participating, that made us feel like we were more free, had more choice in the matter. In a way, that's true. You could say that people's lives have gotten exponentially better since times past, or since like all of human history. But then at the same time, like, we're more manipulated now than ever with the abilities that that people have to do such things to each other on this planet. But anyway, so I think it's sad that a lot of people will struggle with these concepts, and I know I'm doing like a horrible job at explaining what I'm trying to say, and it's because I'm out here walking in the woods and dealing with wind, and this fucking bird just decided to start screaming at me. And you know, I'm in the middle of the coronavirus panic here in Salt Lake City, a quite condensed area, which is a big reason why my wife and I wanted to move, is we wanted to get out of these areas, like away from big cities, for reasons such as this, where people start to freak out when the system starts to crumble. And this is a collapse, I think. I'll just go out and say it's my opinion. I don't know for sure what's going to happen. But what I really think is that this is it. This is the big economic collapse that we've been seeing coming for a long time. There's any number of reasons why something like this would go on. It was inevitable that it would happen eventually. And if you understand how the whole Federal Reserve System works, you know that it's part of it, that these big collapses are actually it's built into the system. The Great Depression, the 2008 financial problem, these are things that are actually designed into this system for how it works. Like, it's not perfect, and people could say, well, it's gotten us this far. Well, it's designed to benefit the elite. It's designed to benefit the wealthy, ultimately. And they know how to make money and profit in these times. They know how to use these financial problems, or these great financial collapses, to their benefit. And although it seems like chaos to us, I'm telling you, things aren't what they seem. That's the whole point. That's kind of the point of this video, is the media will get people thinking that things are happening a certain way, or for certain reasons. And it's usually not at all what they're telling you. Like, not at all. And people think, but not my media. Not my MSNBC. Not my CNN. Not my Fox News. Tucker Carlson covers it all, man. And that's the sad thing to see, is that even people that are like somewhat aware during these times, like, they just seem to buy everything that's being told to them as if it's the absolute truth. And they kind of lose their ability to question the narrative of what's being told to them, kind of in the chaos and the panic. So of course, like, be prepared. That's one of the best ways to feel better when these things are happening, is if you'd been preparing, not having all your money in the 401k stock market, not relying on the mainstream media to get your information so that you can see things coming sometimes before it gets really bad. I've followed certain people in the alternative media that have been covering this coronavirus thing for long enough now that I've seen it coming way out. And like I said, people are almost acting like they just barely found out and barely understand what's happening. And again, here in America, that's by design. The mainstream media is setting this up to be what it is now, which is a catastrophe. And they could have been warning people long before to start getting prepared, but they weren't. What were they doing? They were acting like other things were super important for you to be paying attention to, right? I don't want to get into all of it, but the month of January and February were also quite crazy times, you know, in the media. The war with Iran, I think, was in the works. An impeachment, failed impeachment, a number of other things that were happening. I was paying attention to this. I was hearing and preparing and talking to my wife about this. And we are getting ready to relocate in order to get into a market where we can start making investments that will really change our future. And honestly, I wish I was positioned a little bit better, but at the same time, I feel like I'm positioned perfectly in my next step planning on how I plan to move forward with all this information. Number one priority is to protect my family financially, with financial not stability, I guess I was about to say stability, but longevity, or like getting through this disaster with something to make it through the other side and make sure we can prosper after that. And I feel like we have a good plan in place to get that done. Physically, well, there's been quite a bit of preparation that have gone into that as well, including our intake of foods and the type of food that we consume and the types of supplements or exercise that we like to get into, including raw milk, which I think is a huge factor in your body's ability to fight off contagion, virus. Is you have to have your bacterial makeup proper as well. Mostly no. Rolling in poop, dog. One thing about this dog. Don't you know there's a toilet paper shortage, Mosley, when you're going to get an extra poop? But yeah, it's interesting to see something kind of coming from far out and then watch the public sort of slowly wake up to it and then panic. And it's a little bit terrifying sometimes, right? Like, to be honest, I'm not really worried about the virus. I see a lot of my friends really, really concerned about the virus itself. And maybe I'm being dumb for not being super concerned about that. I'm concerned about people panicking, and what the bigger concern is that I feel like is, like I said, that this is the big financial collapse. This is the one that's really going to change the landscape for the worse, not for the better. As far as like the overall agenda, how it's all going to be rolled out. So yeah, I see a lot of people in like the communities that I float around in. It's legitimate. I mean, it's okay to be concerned about the virus, but it feels like they're missing the bigger picture. I could be wrong about that. Maybe I'm just being pessimistic about things. And at this point, it really doesn't matter. Like, you can continue to prepare at this time. But if you hadn't been like preparing or like getting your money out of the stock market, or even just basic things like preparing with some food supplies and things like that, then, you know, it's not too late, but then you're going to be one of those people out there like fighting other people for the last roll of toilet paper or whatever. The next 2 weeks is going to be quite telling. I plan to do another update on our situation next week, or if it becomes important, we'll do something before then. But yeah, the problem is that the problem that I'm trying to portray in this video is just people's lack of awareness of how the media actually works, and then how government actually works. How the Federal Reserve System actually works, how the economy actually works. And then when stuff like this happens, it seems like it's just some, oh, the virus is just nature. This is just how nature works. Knowing how the world works, what's happening right now is not just a natural phenomenon. This is not just the virus. There's a lot more going on to it, and it's painful to see how naive people are to that, and how Ordo Ab Chao really works. How these psychopaths actually use things like this, if not create things like this, to totally change how things actually work in their favor, or just to continue that on. Anyway, I'll go home and see if this video is salvageable. It's been so windy today that I don't even know if this video is going to be worth posting. So maybe I'll just do another recording at some point. Try to get this stated in a better way anyway, because my thoughts were a little bit all over the place today. Alright, I'm gonna head back home. Stay inside. Just to kind of stay away from everybody, really. I'll catch you guys on the other side. See ya.